Well, good evening. Welcome to Yada Yahowah Radio. I'm happy to be broadcasting to you from the lovely Virgin Islands. As I understand, much of the continental U.S. has gone from bomb cyclones to atmospheric rivers to tornadoes. Oh my! And it's been pretty devastating. Yeah, where you are, Kirk, you've got another 4 or 5 storms headed your way, and it looks like all the rivers have risen. My old home turf, Montecito, got another mud bath from all of this.
Heard about that.
Yeah, and you showed me a picture of Carmel Beach. The beautiful white sand is now nothing but mud. Really, Mother Nature doesn't seem to much like California.
Apparently not.
But what I really was impressed to read yesterday in the newspaper is that with what is like 4 feet of rain so far, another 4 or 5 feet of rain coming, the drought is still not over. So
yeah,
that part is always encouraging when all the rivers have crested over maximum. You know you're dealing with smart people who haven't figured out to dig a hole in the ground to hold water and to use it later, and then dig a ditch to bring it from one place to another. You know you're really dealing with a group of people that have been well educated. They can't do that.
No, you could dredge the current water holes, and then you double the capacity.
I always told my people in Montecito when they were charging me. My monthly water bill got to be $7,000 a month in Montecito. And so I started trucking in water and built an independent water system. And then they fined us for that, even though it was an artesian well where the water just ran out into the sea. They wanted the control over the whole thing. Didn't want anybody to work around their precious system. Now, it does warrant a quick review because we've been talking about the weather on this program and then on Shattering Myths for a better part of 20 years now. And what I originally said when it wasn't climate change that they were touting, but global warming. And they went away from global warming because the Earth at the time wasn't warming. We went through about a 7 or 8 year period where there was no discernible temperature change at all. And during that time, what I talked about is that we ought not be talking about global warming and threatening people with global warming at a time when the Earth really isn't warming, but that it will warm. And I did an investigation, learned that the Earth has gone through many hot and cold periods, some massive. They've recently found Mastodon and Greenland and Iceland, and for Mastodon is a tropical kind of beastie. It's going to, if they lived today, they would be in Africa. They're not able to survive cold. It's not. We're not talking about woolly mammoths here. These are Mastodon, and the analysis of their diet was that they were eating tropical plants,
food,
which means that the temperature in Iceland and Greenland had to be in the range of 30 or 40 degrees warmer than it is now, maybe 50 degrees warmer. So we're not talking about 1 degree or a degree and a half, but 40 or 50 degrees warmer. So the Earth has gone through these warming, cooling periods without any contribution from humankind. We were not around at the time. And what I learned is that that there are also cycles, which are the more moderating cycles than the big ones, like the last ice age or that warming period for what we're talking about. But there have been cycles where the temperature changes around 2 degrees up and about 2 degrees down from what would be the norm. And this happens over 600-year periods. And we can not only trace it back through recorded history, because we now have about 5,000 years of recorded history, and we can trace it back over that period of time and actually see that the warming periods are exceedingly favorable for humankind, and that the cold periods are when we get pandemics and plagues and mass deaths and upheaval in civilizations because people are starving and malnourished and the like. But beyond the 5,000 years of recorded history where we can see the effect and wouldn't want the temperature to be dropping because that's really when mankind has the roughest go of it. But we can go back many hundreds of millions of years, perhaps close to 1 billion years. And in the shallow water sediments of oceans, we can see that every 600 years on average, we go through a warming and cooling period because there's different kind of plants and also sea life that flourishes when the temperatures of the water go up and when the temperatures go down. And that this has gone on for hundreds of millions of years. So to blame humankind on this when there is a record of it occurring over hundreds of millions of years is the problem that we have in terms of our culture, where it's how the conspiracies also exist, where you take something out of context and you fail to consider all of the relevant information. So my view has always been the temperatures will rise. They should have begun to rise right around 1850, which is when that last cold period ended and we began the upswing to a warming period was 1850. That's why when the first photographs appeared of the glaciers, they have retreated since then because we have begun to come out of that last cold period into a warming period. Now, there are negatives and positives both ways. The positives of the warming period is more of the earth where the temperate regions where most people live are far more habitable during the warming periods. Food production is easier worldwide during the warming periods. Disease is actually less because people are better nourished during the warming periods. So it's almost all positive. The negative of the warming periods is that some of the storms that are like tornadoes, which require the swelling up of thunderstorms and supercells, they tend to be more prolific as the temperature rises. Hurricanes tend to be more prolific as the temperature rises. And so there are issues, and I would expect there also to be more extremes, like the extreme rains that you're getting right now in California. All of that is to be expected, and I would expect that over the next decade, it will get worse, not better. It's going to be a fairly minor part of where we are unless we somehow end up with some kind of a solar disruption or of something of that nature, whereby there are going to be a lot of other things that are far more egregious to us. So that's enough on weather, but be prepared.
That's cheery news. Thank you.
Yeah, be prepared for what is to come. It's going to get worse, not better, in terms of the of floods and droughts and winds and hurricanes and tornadoes and oh my.
Sure.
I'm not so sure that it's going to. But overall, as I say, warming trends tend to increase food production. Although we have a counter to all of that, and that is that America's stupid intervention in the Ukraine and sanctions on Russia have had a very detrimental effect on food production. And the supply chain disruption that was a result of COVID had a huge negative effect on food production. And there's probably now 50 countries out of the 200 plus in the world today that are on the precipice of anarchy and destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are barely managing, like in Chile, for example, which is now the first and second floors in most buildings in Santiago are boarded up because of the rioters. But because the country has to function somewhat, they've gotten the rioters to agree to only riot now. I think it's on Fridays. So you get to riot one day a week. You spend the rest of the week maybe 4 days working and maybe a couple of days with your family. So they've really got the ride under control. I love to make fun right now of Chile because they had this youngster that is now head of the country that's got all of the qualifications of my pets here, and that is an anti-Semite to boot. So may they continue to be plagued.
You're here.
It is a wild world out there, and it is definitely going to get progressively worse. One of the things that I have learned is just give you an Ezekiel update. I'm now through, just finished earlier today, the 28th chapter of Ezekiel. It is the wildest ride one could possibly imagine. The first chapter of Ezekiel has actually been fun. No rapes, no prostitution, no. In fact, there isn't. Up to this point, there's been 25 ways to kill a Jew. Is the kind of the running theme of Ezekiel. He really is an anti-Semitic psychopath. But by the time that he gets to the 28th chapter, he is all over himself, and he depicts himself as a cherub, one that was on the walls of Eden, and one of the four people allowed into Eden, and so he presents himself as part of the whole setup of Eden, and how one little indiscretion got him on the wrong side of God, and what a shame for a creature that was created perfect and is the most beautiful and most brilliant. I mean, he really waxes poetic about himself. And it's interesting, too, because you can go back to the beginning of the 3rd century, and Tertullian, who is the numbskull that gave us the Trinity and is the father of Christian theology, Tertullian even recognized, listen, the 28th chapter of Ezekiel is about Satan and the death of Satan. What he didn't figure out, of course, is everything else in it is also about Satan, and that the 28th chapter was actually written by Satan to depict Satan's rise and fall. So it really is an interesting experience. The chapter has gone through a one edit pass, 2 edit passes. The whole edit team will have to have it, and hopefully it'll be added to the book right now that is on the shelf. If you go to the YadaYah.com site, you go to the far right just before the 4 volumes of Questioning Paul. You'll see the 2 volumes of Babel. Volume 1 is complete, of course, and Volume 2 is in the process. I'm now starting the 13th chapter, and I think they have through chapters 6 or 7 already posted. So that is worth a read. I had one of my good friends say, the things you're saying about Ezekiel sound amazing. It would be nice to have it be supported with your translations, and it is dutifully supported with translations in those first 12 chapters, about half of which are already posted. But it is, I will tell you, when you do something as bold, something I don't think has ever been done, not in 2,500 years, to not only accuse Ezekiel of being a false prophet, which others have done because of his derelict prophecies regarding Tyre. He got them all wrong. And one person, maybe I think there's 2 people that have written and say that the scene that I cover in the 5th chapter, I think is Ezekiel 16, is genuinely a rape scene, and that it's graphic sexually. So there's 2 people that had written briefly on it. They didn't know the full scope of it, but at least they tried to bring it to the forefront that this is graphic and grossly inappropriate.
Right.
And as I said, Tertullian was the first and probably the only one who has tried to identify this with Satan, the 28th chapter. Although if you look up Satan, like just Google him on Wikipedia, it will bring up all 3 places where he is detailed And it's got to bother Christians no end to see that Ezekiel 28 is one of those three places. And, of course, along with Genesis 3, where he is in the garden, and also Isaiah 14, which is the most comprehensive presentation of it. So it is most gratifying to read Satan admit that he indeed is the author of this and is the Lord of Babel. There is zero question, and that's important when you do something this bold, because I said there's no one who has written from beginning to end that just says this book is not just about a false prophet. This is the voice of the adversary. This is Satan's playbook, his autobiography. It is what he intends. Fortunately, he's not going to get his wishes, but you will certainly understand him when you've read this book. All right, let's return to where we left off. We were speaking about one of the most powerful passages found anywhere among the prophets. It is Hosea 4:6. I'll read it through again, and then we'll pick up with the commentary on this remarkable statement. It begins with "my people." This is Am Ani. Am can be translated people, family, or a nation. Where it's not a hard and fast rule. The overwhelming percentage of the time that it is used, Am refers to Yisrael and Yehudah. If Yahweh is speaking of non-Yisraelites, he will typically use Goy. Goy and Goyim can also be non-Israelite people. It is often written as Gentile, although that's kind of an odd term because Gentile was the Latin term, and it means non-Roman. Also, nation is a translation of Goyim. So when you see Yahweh is almost always speaking of his people, of Yisrael, his family. My people are destroyed, and they will perish. Dama. They are ruined, and ultimately they will cease to exist. Now, when he says that, he is not talking about 100%. He didn't say that all coal of his people will cease to exist, because it's not true. The overwhelming preponderance of Israelites and Jews, their souls have ceased to exist. That's not a penalty. It's just an acknowledgement of what's true, and it's being affirmed here. My people are destroyed, and they will cease to exist. Any soul, any person who during their life has not accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant, of which there are 5, and who has not acted upon and accepted the invitations to attend Yahweh's 7 Moed Mikra at some point in their life, hasn't come to know Yahweh by name, come to accept him as God, come to like him, respect him, and as I say, engage in the covenant and walk to him by way of the Moed Mikra, the 7 invitations to meet, then their soul, the soul of people who have not done those things, ceases to exist at the end of their mortal existence. They aren't sent to hell. There's no punishment. There is no reward. And that's the vast majority of souls. Those who accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, come to know Yahweh by name, attend his Moed Mikra, end up part of his family, and they get to live with him in his home forever. That is a very small percentage of people. It is less than 1 in a million by Yahweh's own instructions to us. In particular, the second instruction that he etched on the first of the 2 tablets said that there will be thousands who closely examine and carefully consider the terms and conditions of his covenant terms and conditions, and that those will be the ones who receive his mercy. And thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. So the percentage that participate in the covenant and live forever are few. There will be a third group. They are much, much larger than the covenant family, but hugely smaller in number than those whose souls are simply dissipated. And those are the souls of the people who, because of their religion or politics or conspiracy, go about misleading people. And if you lead people away from God by misleading them through a conspiracy, through a religious ideology, through a political ideology, even through overt patriotism, anything that leads people away from God, there is a consequence of that, and that is to spend an eternity incarcerated in Sheol, which is akin to a black hole. There's no tortures, but it is an eternal existence without any escape associated with, the most religious and political, militaristic and conspiratorial people who have existed. So it would not be very pleasant. So that's those three options. God here is not condemning anyone. He's just saying that they will be destroyed, which means their soul will cease to exist upon their mortal demise. From a lack of understanding as a result of corrupted information. Vele ha dayat. And that really is the thing that separates those who know Yahweh from those who don't, those who believe from those who trust. And that is accurate information and processing that information in such a way that you understand it, making the connections between things that can be trusted. And the only place you're going to find valid information about God is the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. But you can't just read it. You have to analyze it, think about it, and you may have to make certain that your translation of it is accurate. And even if you're reading it in Hebrew, you have to be careful, because a modern Hebrew rendering of the ancient Hebrew is likely to take a bent that is based on the Masoretic text, which is to use their diacritical marks to change the meaning of words. And they will also render a word like anah, for example, which means to reply, to answer, to respond, and it's correctly rendered that way in about 95% of its uses, but they will render anah as to afflict, to abase, to humble. And so they will have one on the day of reconciliations, rather than responding to Yahweh's invitation, anah, they will have such individuals afflicting themselves, which is not a way that you would reconcile a relationship with anyone. So it is, even if you're reading it in Hebrew, it's important to know that you better go back to the original text and translate the words based upon the original lettering. This is because you have avoided and rejected the process which leads to understanding. Now, so this is one of the things that is so peculiar for most people, is that they think that religious faith is what leads one to God. They think that religious rituals, religious laws, religious behavior, religious compliance, being patriotic, being doing good deeds, and really believing is what would cause one to be saved, but not true. God said that souls perish because they have avoided and rejected the process which leads to understanding. And there is a process which leads to understanding. It has nothing to do with faith. In fact, faith is a tremendous liability, because with faith you have no interest in knowledge. Understanding and knowledge eliminate faith. There is no faith when you know. And often the information which you come to know, particularly as it pertains to God, is contrary to every religion. So knowledge and understanding destroy the credibility of religion. But beyond that, once you know and understand, you have eliminated faith. And so it's very important to understand this concept that God is not encouraging people to be religious. In fact, his problem is that people are religious. And the religious people are destroying their own souls. They're causing their souls to dissipate. So what God is encouraging here is for you to come to acquire, rather than reject and avoid quality information and the process that leads to understanding. He wants you to focus on what matters. And he's going to tell us in a moment what matters. It's the one thing that matters, studying his Torah. And a word on that. When he speaks of this in a moment, Torah does not mean law, and Torah is not limited to the 5 books that Moshe conveyed to us. Torah means source from which guidance, teaching, instruction, and directions flow. It is based upon, according to God, the Hebrew verb yara, which conveys exactly that thought. So the Torah is a source of God's teaching, his instructions, and his guidance, as well as his directions. And so when you study his teaching and you use your nesalma, which is your conscience, to be discerning regarding it, you can make the connections between the things he has shared to understand the message. And once you make that transition from observing the Torah, which permeates, by the way, his prophets and his psalms, because it's his teaching, and his guidance, which permeates all of them, and you make the connections between everything he has shared, you will come to understand. And when you come to understand, you not only know Yahweh, but you're in a perfect place to engage in a relationship with him. Therefore, he says, I will consistently reject you and avoid you from serving as my priests and ministers on my behalf, which means that those who are claiming as Jews, or any religious person, to be serving God as priests and ministers are lying. Very clear. Therefore, I will consistently reject. It's not I will reject for the next 15 minutes. It's not I will reject until Jesus comes. Nope. I will consistently reject, ongoing, call imperfect, you and avoid you from serving as my priests and ministers. This means there can be no rabbis that are intermediaries between Jews and God. That means that there are no priests that serve in that role. The Catholic Church is lying, as are the Orthodox Church. And anyone who would claim to be a minister serving God is lying.
Yes.
And since you have consistently ignored, ongoing here, also written in the imperfect, and forgotten, failing to remember or respond to the Torah teaching and guidance of your God, then I will forget your children. The Torah is Yahweh's source of teaching and guidance. It is the only place where you can come to know what God is offering and expects from us in return. It is the only place you will be introduced to him by name and come to know him well enough to decide whether or not you like and respect him, even love him. And if you look at religions, Judaism has replaced the Torah with their Talmud. They even call their Talmud the Torah. Christianity has essentially annulled the Torah, replacing it with their New Testament. And while Islam claims that the Quran confirms the Torah, it's just the opposite. It contradicts it in every possible way. And so the three most famous religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, have excluded themselves based upon the state, as have all but maybe 1 in a million people. So since you have consistently ignored and forgotten, failing to remember and respond to the Torah teaching and guidance of your God, I also will ignore and forget your children. It means that it's long since over for those who ignore the Torah. But what God is saying here is that I can't continually try to convey my message to and awaken generation after generation. I've just run out of hope. I've given you my guidance. I've given you my instruction. I've done everything I can to liberate you and help you appreciate this relationship. If you're not going to do it, then it's just going to have to be time out. I'm going to withdraw from your children and your children's children. It is a harsh medicine, but this time out is from around 700 BCE and even past today. Yahweh is doing his best to awaken his family, Israelites, Yehudim, but the time of the prophets is long, long past. So, this statement from God is the 1-2 punch which destroys Judaism. Yahweh has said that Yisrael has ceased to be rational regarding his Torah. They much prefer their Talmud and don't even know that their Talmud conflicts in every possible way with his Torah teaching. There is nothing about Hasidic Judaism that is a match for the Torah. And even their Shabat, they've made so onerous that it's the hardest day of the week on all the things that you can't do. And they don't spend any time on that day observing their relationship with Yahweh or celebrating it. They won't even say his name. There isn't a single Jew that would know the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant or the 5 benefits of the covenant, or that understand the intent of 7 Moed Mikre, which is the path to God, or that even celebrate the 7 Moed Mikre, apart from those who have come to know Yahweh and what he's offering through this program in these books. God's prophetic pronouncement is both consistent with our observable reality regarding rabbis and diametrically in opposition to Judaism. Yes, it's an opposition to Christianity and Islam too. But God began this by saying, my people. And so he's addressing Jews. As I've mentioned, Torah does not mean law as the religious profess. It is comprised of teaching and guidance, things that we can learn from, but we cannot obey. The Torah is Yahweh's. The Talmud is rabbinical. The fate of our souls and those of our children hinge upon which we rely, or whether we choose to believe. Both are not acceptable. That's not an option. Israel is destroyed and Israelites perish, ceasing to exist, because they do not understand the difference between Yahweh's teachings and man's laws. There's only one way to participate in the Bereth covenant, and one path to Shamayim heaven. We accept it and teach it to our children, or we will be forgotten by God. It's as surely as their parents ignored Yahweh. The fate of every soul is determined by this formula. we come to know and understand by studying the Torah teaching of our God. Yahweh accepts or rejects us solely on this basis. And there is something to ponder here, since God's people are destroyed for lack of understanding His Torah. How can faith be an alternative? After all, faith is a substitute for knowledge. So God is ruling out all religious approaches. The larger human institutions grow, it is a fact, the worse they become. It has been the truth for the last 6,000 years of recorded history. Whether it's empires, civilizations, nations, institutions, it's gang mentality played out on a scale of, as I say, nations and civilizations and institutions. It's the same with the participants and the principalities, as you will, as it is with religion. They not only feed upon people's willingness to acquiesce and be controlled, but the leaders of such institutions are also emboldened by the increased access to sex, power, and money. And so it is, as it is with the cleric, so it is with the king, and those they are conned. It is what Yahweh has said. Many have been lured into a false belief that civilization is a positive term and that man has grown and prospered over time, but it's just not true. The history of civilization is hellish. Every civilization until about 100 years ago imposed a caste system. And in that caste system, there was no upward mobility. Many caste systems, like the Roman caste system, had about 15 different levels. Slave was the lowest level. The highest was what they call them, Caesars or emperors or kings, but that was the highest level. Only the emperor king had free will, and even theirs, they had to placate the religious and the military leaders to be able to rule and live. But that is the story of human civilization. Also, until the last 100 years, women had no rights. We talk glowingly of ancient Greece, and yet in ancient Greece, women have fewer rights than we afford our pets.
It's true.
This is just the reality of it, and they were vicious. Most civilizations lived on slavery. That's why they were so warlike. They needed slaves for everything. In ancient Athens, for example, about 80%, not 8%, 80% of the population were slaves. The same thing would be true with a Roman town. These are really despicable conditions, and if you study the history of civilization, what you find is the history of war, and that really hasn't changed. Even the superpower of the day, the United States of America, claiming to be peaceful, we have engaged in well over 100 wars in the 400 years that since we invaded, or Europeans invaded this continent, displaced the native peoples. Over 100 different distinct wars in 400 years. This last one will probably be our undoing, as we have engaged in a proxy war with Russia in the Ukraine. I think it will end in a nuclear exchange.
Yeah.
But that is the nature of large civilizations. There is the largest civilization on Earth today is actually the Roman Catholic Church, with 1.5 billion people, and it's reprehensible. It's probably the single greatest detriment to humankind is the Roman Catholic Church and what they have perpetrated. No organization has been more anti-Semitic for a longer period of time or done more harm to Jews than the Roman Catholic Church. And it is a direct outgrowth of Imperial Rome. In fact, there's really no distinction as Imperial Rome morphed into Roman Catholicism. So be aware that God's not impressed with nations. He does not like patriotism or patriots. He does not like militaries. He does not view them as protecting the people's freedoms or liberties. He is opposed to these things, and that's why the first condition of the covenant is to walk away from religion and politics. So as we press on through Hosea, the next statement reads, "So as they grew in number, and as the rabbis became more influential," Rabab him, "so they became so much the more they missed the way to approach me. I exchanged their reputation and reward for shame." Hosea 4:7. So as they grew in number, and as the rabbis became more influential, so much the more they missed the way to approach me. That's the truth of the matter. With the previous statement excommunicating the Cohen, the priest, it is by recognizing that Rabab serves as the basis for rabbi. And this becomes a biting indictment. The rabbis, Rabab, the number of rabbis, has increased dramatically. I think there's a chief rabbi for every possible thing that you can imagine. And as they have grown, so much the more they have missed the way. They have misled people on the way to God. You listen to them today as they engage in politics and have allowed themselves to be bribed to support the Netanyahu coalition in Israel, and you just cringe with how these religious nutcases have presented themselves as if they define what it means to be a Jew. Jews not about ethnicity anymore, according to the rabbis. It's about whether or not you are ultra-Orthodox. And the more religious you are, the more God disdains a person. They are the greatest threat to the Jewish people and have been for a better part of 2,000 years. The greatest threat to Jews is Judaism and the rabbis who promote it. Now, to be fair, such is the case with every religion. People go along to get along. They assume that their religion is right because so many people believe it. That's the whole sales pitch of the Haredim. They see everybody dressing in the stupid black garb. They see everybody with the same stupid curly cues. They see everybody, with the same black hat. They see all the women who have complied and shaved their heads and dress up in tents and forego all freedom, allow themselves to be treated as numbskulls, as too stupid to read the Torah, too stupid to make a decision, too polluted to be around men, and they allow themselves to endure this. And they do it because every other woman around them has submitted, and because not to submit is to be ostracized. And, of course, the rabbis give them kosher phones so that they can't call rape hotlines. They can't search for the truth. They have no information other than the venom that the rabbis are feeding them. And so it's insular, and they, as I say, they go along to get along. For most of human history, deceptions have held sway. When I wrote Prophet of Doom, and I was constantly told, we have to be right. We're the fastest growing religion. There's 1.5 billion of us, and there's one of you. Therefore, you're wrong and we're right. Well, I could have taken that approach during the time of Imperial Rome, and the religion of Imperial Rome was the only acceptable religion, and so it was by a factor of 1 billion to 1 if you spoke out against it. Before then, we could have gone to Greece or Carthage or to Babylon or to Assyria. The history of mankind is that the overwhelming percentage of people have been wrong almost all of the time. So if you believe something that is popular, you are absolutely wrong with God. In fact, this is one of God's single most repeated themes, which is that he is set apart, everything important to him is set apart, and that if you're not set apart, then you are common. You're profane. And to be common or profane is to adhere to something that is popular. So if you are among the most popular religions in Israel, you are considered profane by God and not set apart to him. Same thing would be true with Christianity, which is the world's most popular religion, or the second most popular religion, Islam. By the very nature of their popularity, they become wrong because they're the antithesis of being set apart unto God. Now, Hosea 2:7 also presents an ironic twist. As people grow in stature, they recede from God. The more people move in one direction, the more likely is that they're all headed in the wrong direction. The more people strive to be influential, the more insignificant they become. Humankind has substituted wealth for an eternal reward, and it has exchanged the illusion of power for its genuine manifestation. And this is particularly true among the Haredim in Israel. Our appreciation for Yahweh and his prophetic testimony grows when we set what he has revealed beside a long analysis of human history and human malfeasance. A recounting of the exploits of civilizations leaves the observant and moral with the realization of just how awful men and women have been, particularly since we have written these 26 volumes thus far, all available for free at YadaYah.com. Yada meaning to know. Yah is the familial form of Yahweh at YadaYah.com. And have done more than 10,000 radio programs for Israelites. We speak for you. We speak to you. Of all people, Israelites should know just how horrendous civilizations have been. Look at what happened with the Assyrians, brutalizing Israel, and brutalizing the northern kingdom for no other reason than they were there. The Assyrians wanted to dominate trade routes, and so anyone that didn't capitulate and pay them tribute, and the tribute had to be so egregious that the people starved, were bludgeoned to death. And the Assyrians hauled away 10 of the 12 tribes. Right around 700 and change BCE.
Yeah.
And they were brutal. I mean, they put nose rings through the Jews and chained them together and made them walk nude from where they were taken, and crucified and brutalized hundreds of thousands, hauled away millions. And it wasn't very much after that when the Babylonians defeated the Assyrians that they demanded their tribute. And when it didn't happen the way they wanted, they attacked Israel, 597 BCE. And then when Israel said, well, maybe we should go with Egypt since there was a hiccup between Egypt and Babylon. We'll pay our tribute there, which is basically a bribe to survive. The Babylonians said, well, there's a consequence for that, boys. And they came back, and after a 3-year siege, they destroyed Jerusalem. They hauled virtually every Jew into slavery, at least those they didn't kill. They thrashed, plundered, and burned Jerusalem, tore down the temple, hauled everything away. They were brutal. And it wasn't just them. You know, it wasn't very long after them that the Greeks came. And the Greeks have this reputation for being democratic and therefore peaceable. No, they were thugs.
No.
And there are very few people as mean-spirited as was Alexander the Great and the generals that divided up his kingdom upon his death. They were savages. And so the Greeks came in and they tormented Jews. And the Greeks were pussycats compared to the Romans. Imperial Rome, in fact, even during the Republic, was Pompey invaded Israel and bludgeoned Jews, and that was around 66 BCE. And then we have Vespasian and his son Titus that bludgeoned Israel, destroyed the temple in 70 CE, and then Hadrian lured them back and was the most brutal of all when he began the diaspora, crucifying countless Jews. I mean, how could you imagine civilization mean anything other than cruel? And then out of Imperial Rome grew the Roman Catholic Church, and for a better part of 1,500 years thereafter, Jews were condemned as subhuman, as demonic, and forced to live in ghettos. They had no rights. And anything the Roman Catholic Church could do to terrorize them and subjugate them, they did. The history of the Roman Church and Jews is horrific. And they were party to the rise of Nazi Germany, and it happened all over again. And between those two, we had the birth of Islam, the most satanic of religions that make killing Jews the highest reward that a Muslim can achieve. So if any nation understands it, and then you have the empires today that are progressive and socialistic and communistic, and the progressives have become enemies of Israel. So if any nation, any people ought to understand that politics doesn't work, that nations are almost universally anti-Semitic, and that the result of partnering with them, doing business with them, is deadly for Jews. So our appreciation for Yahweh's prophetic testimony just grows. The more open we are to studying the history of humanity. And as I've shared with you, it is true that individually we humans can be good or bad. Some are resolutely awful. Some are extraordinarily charitable. But collectively, we're horrendous, and there aren't very many, if any, examples of large nations, empires, or institutions where people have behaved well. You know, we humans have engaged in human sacrifice to appease the gods. Heck, we're doing it now with progressives and the mutilation of children under the transgender. We're literally mutilating our children. We have a history of enslaving our neighbors so that we can prosper by their toil. We impose our politics and economics schemes and claim to be righteous and democratic. We rape the planet, we rob it of its resources, and we're murderous while pretending to be moral and peaceful. Lies are preferred to truth, control to freedom, religion to responsibility, and to relationship with God. You know, one of the real examples, and there has finally been some uprising in the U.S. Congress. I don't know where it's going to go. But there's the realization that we have squandered well over 100 billion, maybe 150 billion, could even be 200 billion, on killing Russians in the Ukraine. And that much of that money has no accountability. And even the part that has accountability, none of it should have been spent. We've spent more money killing Russians in the Ukraine, coming ever closer to nuclear war, than we spend on the infrastructure of the United States. We're sending them so many weapons that our military is saying that we're no longer defensible as a nation. And so there's a group of Republicans that are finally saying, please, we need an audit. We need to stop this. This is insane. Who knows how long that'll last because of politics. And, you know, immediately there, everybody's having a field day with Biden had classified documents in his garage. It was okay because there was a neat old car in that same garage, a Corvette Stingray. Who would care for the classified documents if you've got a neat car there? But that kind of looked embarrassing since he went out of his way to condemn Trump for the same crime. But, you know, we'll get lost in our knickers and take the eye off the ball of the Ukraine. And the Ukraine I bring up because it is the place where truth died. That was the first casualty of that war, is that very few people. And I've been talking about why we shouldn't have done this in the Ukraine and what the consequence is going to be and how it's ultimately going to lead to a nuclear confrontation. I've been talking about this since 2006. So this is not a new topic, and it's only recently that a very, very small number of people have joined in and recognized that what we're doing is insane. One of the things that we all ought to think about is that as we establish enormous militaries and we equip the killers with weapons of mass destruction, that this is not conducive to life. When we are indoctrinated to praise soldiers and those wielding the instruments of death, and we believe that the least free and most destructive institutions on earth, which are militaries, are responsible for our liberty and our prosperity, we're being stupid. We're being played for fools. We tax the productive and we reward the unproductive and think that we're being progressive and compassionate. We divide people into groups based upon the color of their skin, and then we blame others for being racist. And should someone raise their head above the crowd to demonstrate the degrading duplicity of it all, we slander and crucify the lone voice of reason. We will even accept a God and reject the God based not on the testimony of God, but of men. When engaged in pursuing our political or religious ambitions, people are almost universally rotten. This is Hosea 4:8, and we'll go into 4:9. Mm-hmm. They feed upon the wrongdoing and sin offerings of my people. These souls lift up and accept. They promote and honor their perversity, their wrongdoing, and their depravity. And so likewise, it will be the same for the people as it will be for the priest. I will hold both of them accountable for their ways. I will repay them, bringing back upon them the foolish, beguiling, and the cruel things they have done. Well, that means that that old adage of don't blame me, that other person misled me. I mean, what was the excuse by every Nazi after the war? It wasn't my fault. I was just following orders.
Taking orders,
told me to do it. Yeah, God's not going to buy that. God's not going to buy. It's not my fault that I dressed it up like I was going to a funeral and treated my daughter as if she had no value, and indoctrinated my son in this foolish religion because the rabbi made me do it. No, he's really clear here. It's the religious behavior, the sin offerings of my people that are repulsive. And they lift up and honor, they celebrate the perversity. They celebrate the depravity. And because they're out celebrating it, whether it's, God's talking about his people, so this is talking about Judaism. But it rings true for Christianity and Islam. They're absolutely celebrating the lies. And so God finally says, enough already. If you all want to celebrate these lies and tell each other how wonderful you are, then you can have each other. But understand that ultimately there's going to be accountability. Now, and particularly with Israel, Israel has no excuse. God liberated Israel. He formed his covenant with Israel. He delivered his Torah to Israel. He walked with them, gave them the land of Israel, performed his acts of restoration within Israel, built his home in Israel. He's done everything for his people, Israel. And so the Israelites are without excuse. You ought to know better. And so he's going to repay the foolish, beguiling, and cruel things that the Israelites have done to one another. And recompense is not going to be fun because you're without excuse. Yahweh, through Hosea, has told you to stop being religious, to start listening to him, to start thinking as opposed to believing. And if you don't want to listen to him, then understand there will be recompense. Now, I think this is true both literally and symbolically. If not for people's individual and collective sense of guilt and implied hellish consequences, religions would not exist. Rabbis and priests prey on people's fear of the unknown and their fear of punishment. As a result, they devour the funds of the unsuspecting by promising their victims that their donations will somehow exonerate them and elicit favor with God. It's really a cruel joke. But who do you blame? Do you blame the rabbi or the priest or the imam who is collecting on this and making money out of it and lying to the people, or the people who allow themselves to be deceived?
The rabbis.
Yeah. And God says both. And so let's just step into the shoes of the Haredi for a moment. If the rabbi who was making merchandise of you, and you allow him, and yet they're not taking the Torah and prophets from you. Why, they're encouraging you not to read it and to spend all of your time with your nose and the Talmud, but you've got it. You can read it. You can read Hosea.
It's very true.
Open the 4th chapter. See what it says. Deal with it. Show some backbone. Save yourself. Save your family. What's your excuse?
Yeah.
Even Christians, they carry it around. They could read it. One of the things that was just so stunning to me is how obvious it is that Ezekiel not only is a false prophet, because it's not like he occasionally gets a statement wrong, and one wrong, in the whole book, and he's a false prophet. He didn't get anything right. It's all wrong. And you just can't be 100% wrong by accident. If you toss a coin in the air, yes or no, heads or tails, 100 times, it is not going to land on tails 100 times. And yet, there's 1,000 statements in Ezekiel, and every single one is wrong. It's not possible unless it's by intent. And so, how in the world can there be religious Jews, Christians, and Muslims that read this book and claim it comes from their God when it's all wrong? It's just stunning to me how far people will go to try to justify the most absurd things. And that's what God's saying. You're just foolish. It's cruel what you've done. I don't want any part of you, but I'm telling you that I will hold you accountable. I have a hunch, too, and it's based upon a number of things that I've translated, that for Jews, there is a fellow that he was taken to Yahowah. Yahowah really likes this guy. Only person really taken in this way. I know there's the story about Enoch, but we don't know enough about Enoch to have any clue. But we know a lot about Elia. Super sarcastic. No respect for religion or politics. Hates it. And in fact, is eminently qualified to tear it to ribbons. Elia is going to judge Jews. He's going to be the guy. And if you want to know the outcome, consider what he did to the 850 prophets of the Lord and Asherah. That's what's going to happen. He's going to be the judge, and it's going to be fatal.
Yeah.
Now, someone say, well, God's going to be my judge. No, he's not. No, he's not. Why don't you tell me something that God did alone? Even creation, he uses we.
Yeah.
Because he was there with the Ruach Kodesh. And I think at that time he had probably also created the Malach. God doesn't do anything alone. He created the universe for man, and the moment man existed, he began a relationship with us. He went to liberate the children of Israel with a man, an 80-year-old. He saved the people around where the Garden of Eden was and where civilization sprouted from there, red and tooth and claw, by working with an old guy to build a boat. When Israel wanted a king and they chose poorly, God says, listen, I think this is a bad idea. You're rejecting me. But if you're going to have one, would you at least be a shepherd? Let me explain to you what the right choice is, and gave them that example. And not only led Israel at the only time it was really glorious, through a man, David, but through all eternity, he's bringing Dowd, the Messiah and Son of God, back to be responsible for leading us through eternity. God never works alone. So it's something to think about through this entire process, because he's going to judge Jews through the man that he feels is the most qualified to do it. And that man's going to be Elia. And he does not take religion lightly. He despises it. And to be tried in front of Elia is to be mocked. He won't. He's not going to listen to any excuse. Yeah, it's going to be shameful. he happens to be one of my very favorites. I like his sense of humor because I think it reflects intellect. And I think God likes to mock religion. My favorite of the prophets is kind of a toss-up between the three guys. I don't know which one of the three I like the most, but for different reasons. I think Moshe is the most marvelous human being that ever lived in terms of his courage and his steadfastness, his devotion to duty, his intellect, the soaring nature of his speeches and Debatim, herding Jews across the desert for 40 years. That is no easy task.
That alone?
That guy really had his
act
together. He is such an impressive guy. And even before he knew Yahweh, he stood up for his people and risked his own life to do so, only to be embarrassed and shamed by his people for having done so. So Moshe is really high on my list. It's very hard for me to overlook Dode. He's the most exceptional man in human history, probably the most brilliant, certainly the most articulate, the best shepherd, the most passionate about God. The one man God said, "He is my son, I am his father," the one man that Yahweh anointed 3 times as Messiah, and the one person God is bringing back to lead us through forevermore. And to that, there's 2 others that I really, really love, and for different reasons. But I love the humor and intellect and the character of Elijah, who we've talked about, and then I feel a special kinship for Yasha Isaiah. There's so much of Yasha Isaiah that speaks of what we're doing together. And his prophetic insights are so rich and so sweeping that it's wonderful to be part of the same team and the same family as these individuals. So,
on that note, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I hate to interrupt, but I really, as I was reading this passage, I couldn't, and took a lot of notes and started thinking about stuff. I couldn't really understand. I still don't really understand what it is about people that they need to put somebody between them and God. They must feel that they pick out that this is a holy person and he can go to God and he can somehow be my in between guy. And obviously, and then I applied it to the rabbis, modern day rabbis. And of course, I made a list like I used to when we were doing the Paul shows. Rabbis don't teach anyone Yahweh's name. We talked about it forever. They don't know what it means. They don't. Further, they don't know what it means, and they don't know how to pronounce it. And even if they do, they won't repeat it, and they bury it, and then they change it to Lord, Satan's title. I mean, that if you knew that alone, you would say, "What the hell am I listening to these people for?" And then they don't teach the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant, which are the paramount. To me, when I found that, then I said, okay, I know what he wants. I can do that. Every one of them, I can do it. I got to turn. I can deal with this.
Nothing hard on that list.
I don't need to approach you. I didn't have to approach you anymore. But I mean, you know what I mean. I didn't.
Once you know the 5 terms and conditions,
I got it.
You are on your own, man, and you can deal directly with Yahweh. You said, okay, this is what you want. I'm there, man.
Yeah. Rabbis ignore it.
They're empowering.
They don't.
They're liberating.
They don't teach. In addition, when you go to those 5 terms and you realize that there's the Moreh Mikra, is the pathway home. There's the teach and implement that allows us to know what these are for and what Yahweh's done and to appreciate Him better, such and such, such. They don't officiate these feasts like they were told to do if they were Lowy.
Oh no! They completely ignore matzah. They make Passover the end all and be all, and yet matzah is vastly more important than Passover. Passover is part of matzah, not the other way around.
Yeah.
They have no concept of what Bakurim means as the third of the 7 Moed Mikra. Very few even mention Shavua anymore because, well, the Christian church stole it with their Pentecost. But that's an exceedingly important day. They hate Towrah to the point that they've replaced it with the Babylonian New Year and Rosh Hashanah.
Mm-hmm.
They've corrupted Kippurim to the point that it's the opposite of what God intended. Rather than a day of reconciliations, it's a day to abuse oneself. And clueless is the fact that Sukkah means I'm inviting you back to Eden. Yeah, there's not a rabbi or religious Jew on earth that has any concept of these things. And when you know them, you're totally independent. Independent with Yahweh is a good thing. You're not beholden to anybody.
Yeah. Two things further. That led me to think about the law, which is obeying rules, and it really eliminates free will. And so Yahweh wouldn't do that. Why bother? If you're going to do that, then you can't have a relationship. The whole thing falls apart based on changing things to from teaching, Yahweh instruction, all that sort of thing. If you're going to have a law that's going to be obeyed by regulations and be penalized because of it, you couldn't function that way. It's no relationship that way, and they never express those things. Once again, and then that led me to an old thing. I was looking in my drawer, or across my desk rather, and I've got this little Post-it note, and I can't read it from here with my bifocal, so I have to get up real close. And then I said, it's Mizmor 119:3:3, and if you will allow me, it's Yahweh, Yara, teach me, direct the way, choke the prescriptions for living, and obviously, and teach me the way, and Netzar, I will habitually observe them, equib, and I will benefit until the end of time. That's the antidote to all this stuff, to these people. You don't need these people. For goodness sakes, you can translate this stuff online and get 99% of it with a little thought behind it if you understood the concepts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on everything, and this is the only place and this is so sad. This is the only place you'll hear it.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only place you'll read it in depth. I mean, a lot of people will say things like all of us talk to people, but I mean in depth where you can actually explore it, see what it says, compare it to what you find written in an interlineary and a lexicons. And I do it every week. Whether we speak about it or not, it makes no difference. It's fun for me.
Yeah, there's not a single program on this material. Yeah, not a single program on this material anywhere, and we have tens of thousands of them. There isn't a single book on this material anywhere that's ever been written, and yet we have 26 of them all posted at Yada Yahowah for you to read for free. You know, they're all published also by Amazon that you can buy just for the cost of actually printing them and the shipment to you. We don't make a royalty on them. We're trying to you could download to give you everything you could possibly want, and we're not sharing our conclusions. We're sharing what Yahweh conveyed. You know, we read, we translate as thoroughly, completely, and as accurately his statements as possible. We even put the genitive form of the Hebrew word within the parenthetical, because if you're reading it online, you can go and copy and paste it into a search engine and verify it yourself. So even the translations are open for you to verify. And if there's something in a translation that is complex, that might have various potential meanings, we'll acknowledge it. We'll tell you this could mean any one of these different things, and this is the reason we've chosen to render these definitions within the translation itself. And then we do what Yahweh is encouraging here. It's one thing, and it's an exceedingly important thing to know what God said, to accurately and completely study the words he has revealed. It is another thing, and far more important, than to make the proper connections between everything he has conveyed, so you see the big picture through the details. And that is the reason why there's so many insights and commentary throughout Yada Yahowah. We're trying to help those who are reading this information understand, because and Kirk, once you understand, then you have a direct relationship with Yahweh. You do not need to rely on anyone. You are completely liberated to benefit from all he is offering. And have a wonderful thing. You get to share it with others who have come to know him and be part of the covenant family, but yet you are also independent of everyone, not dependent upon anyone except Yahweh himself.
Yay.
Yeah, so it is all here. We gain nothing from you choosing to accept Yahweh, to know Yahweh, to attend his Moed Mikveh, to accept the terms and conditions of his covenant. There's no dime in this for us. I've been doing this now for 22 years. I've never been paid by anyone, never received a donation from anyone, and I actually pay for the privilege, as Dee knows, because she manages our social media outreach. I pay for it. All the translation tools, probably $10,000 worth of translation tools, I pay for. This Blog Talk Radio is not free. I pay for it. The websites we're hosted on. Now, that doesn't mean there's not others making a contribution. There are. And donating their time for free. There are many who are part of the covenant family. And we all do it for the benefit of others. And it is one of these very few situations where the more the merrier, so long as we're of like mind. God does not want anyone who is religious or political in heaven. So there's a filter excluding the political, the conspiratorial, the religious. But if you're open-minded and actually invest the time to come to know Yahweh and to come to enjoy his company and accept his conditions, attend his invitations, then the more of those kinds of individuals, no matter how divergent their personalities and proclivities may be, the more enjoyable eternity is going to be. Now, I want people with different perspectives and different capabilities and different interests to spend eternity with.
Yeah.
So the universe is enormous, and whether we're sharing it with 10 people, 100 people, 1,000, or 1 million, there's plenty of universe to go around, and it's actually 7-dimensional, so it's infinitely beyond our imagination.
Exponential, yes.
Yeah, it's not just the 400 billion galaxies, each averaging some several hundred billion stars apiece of the known universe, and that's only 4% of the known universe, because 96 exceeds our ability to even understand what it is in terms of dark energy and dark matter, which I actually think are dimensions. But as you're liberated in time in the fourth dimension, the universe expands infinitely beyond what we can see, and you can enjoy the entire universe when you're liberated in time. And there's 2 dimensions beyond that en route to Yahweh, who is 7-dimensional. What we're being offered is so enormous that having more people makes it more fun. But it's not just that. When you come to be part of Yahweh's family and know him, then we have this tendency to want what he wants. He's dad. Right. He's really nice to us. And so we want to be involved in the family business. And the family business is conveying his message and inviting people to become part of the covenant family. That is the family business. And so you want to be part of it. And those who are part of the family business share the words of Yahweh, and they do so passionately and accurately and completely, and then seek to understand them so that we can share and pass on that understanding and the insights to others. And the second thing is, it is so empowering and enriching and uplifting and emancipating to be with Yahweh. We don't want to covet that. We want to share it. It's like seeing a beautiful rainbow across a streaked sky over the ocean, and if you see it alone, it's one thing. If you get to share it, it's much more beautiful. couple nights ago, I was out in the evening, and my wife had a rough day. She turned in early, and so I saw the moon, full moon, duck in and out behind clouds, and it glistened with the silver lining on these clouds. And then the most magnificent meteor that I've ever seen in terms of the brightest and the longest trail streaked across the sky. And my only regret was I was viewing it alone.
It wasn't there.
Yeah. And so, you know, we naturally want to share. Yahweh's wonderful. He's approachable. He's fun to be around. And so we're doing this because we are so blessed, so benefited from this, and we just want others to know about it. And part of it too is we share Yahweh's antagonism towards religion and politics, and we recognize that it takes courage, but it's the right thing to do. It's in a very big way. It's like what we talk about often. If you were to walk by a group of people and they're holding down and raping a child, are you going to be one of those that just walked by? Are you going to be one of those that films it? Are you going to be one of those that might sneak away to call the police? Or are you going to be one that tries to help that child and tries to defend them? Who are you? And with Yahweh, religion is raping the world and robbing children of their dignity and their lives. And politics is doing the same thing. So are you just going to stand by, walk past, try to stop it? Character counts, you know. Moshe saw the religious and political and economic establishment of Egypt beating one of his own to death, and he stood in the way. He had the courage and the character to stand up for the man that was being beaten. That's what makes Moshe so extraordinary. And then when he realized how awful the Egyptian religion and government was, he left Egypt. That's what made him useful to God. So, are you willing to do that? I guess the first thing is, Kirk and Dee, you'd have to recognize that that's why we speak about these things, why God speaks about them, that religion leads you in the wrong direction. You'd have to question your religion and then leave it. And until you question your religion and lead it, and question your politics and leave it, you have zero chance of coming to know Yahweh or engaging a relationship with Him. You know, look at Abraham. Abraham wasn't the nicest guy on the planet, but Abraham did something that almost no one else was willing to do. He walked away from Ur, which was Sumer, and what became Babylon. He walked away from the most religious and political place on earth. And so after he walked away, Yahweh could engage with him and introduce himself to him. Look at Moshe. God didn't call Moshe when he was in Egypt under the influence of religion and politics. He waited until after Moshe had left it. You know, he didn't find Yod as a leading figure, as you know, in a yeshiva and Israel, or under Saul's command leading a charge, or as a priest, or as some kind of a religious zealot. No, he found him out tending sheep. He was the only son that was nowhere to be found when the others were auditioned. He was out in Bethlehem tending sheep, and way back. Until we walk away from religion and politics, God's unknowable to us. And that's why God spends so much time, as he's doing through the book of Hosea, calling his people away from deism and from Israeli politics. It's only once you walk away from them and you know they're rotten to the core that you have a chance to come to know God. You know, Israel is right now in a very, very precarious place. About half of Israel despises Benjamin Netanyahu. About half likes Benjamin Netanyahu. But for Benjamin Netanyahu to prevail under those circumstances, he had to put together a coalition of extreme religious people. I mean, extreme zealots. And the kinds of things that they're trying to do now in terms of immigration into Israel based on religious qualifications, divorce in Israel where only the man can grant it under rabbinic law, judicial reform where convicted crooks and criminals can hold ministerial positions. The kinds of things that they're trying to do are so outrageous that the 50% of Israel that can't stand Benjamin Netanyahu are taking to the streets. And the former coalition members in the past government, which was also a government from hell, they're now encouraging people to be riotous in the street. And then the Netanyahu's coalition is saying we ought to arrest the opposition leaders, which it's becoming a very dangerous thing, even talking about civil war.
Yeah.
And with Muslims surrounding them, wanting to obliterate them when Israel is doing what it does best, which is infighting, sacrificing their own. This is a very scary time. And so I'm here to tell you that if you are a Jew now, if you are listening at this point, his chances are you're listening either to an archive or you're on the phone because we're no longer broadcasting as part of our program. But still, 99% of the listeners are to archives, and the program is posted throughout the internet on various sites, many of which are linked from the resources and community link on the Yada Yah site. If you are listening and you're in Israel tonight, then I would strongly encourage you to devote considerable time to reading Yada Yahowah. Start with an introduction to God. The first volume is Debar Word. Come to understand why God is speaking to you and why he is speaking through me. This is why you, why me is an essential part of that. Come to understand who Yahweh is, what he is offering, what he is expecting in return. And this will draw you through the entire series of books. And by the time you've read them, you will absolutely know Yahweh, you will fall in love with him, and you will be part of his family. And this is important because life in Israel is going to get exceedingly difficult. To be a Jew in America and in Europe is going to become exceedingly difficult. As bad as things have been, they're about to get much worse. The time of Jacob's troubles is quickly approaching. We are just 10 and a half, just shy of 11 years away from Yahweh's return with Dode. And the intervening time is going to be hellish, particularly as we approach those last 3.5 years, beginning on Passover in 2030. It will be very difficult to survive as a Jew anywhere. The world is going to turn against you. You will have only Yahweh and his covenant family for support. So please, now, before it is too late, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's worth your investment of time. And for the many Jews who have been indoctrinated to believe that if it's not a Jew speaking to you, don't listen. One of the things you need to understand is that Jews stop listening to Yahweh. That's why he said right here in Hosea 4:6, because you have forgotten my Torah and because you have promoted all manner of religious lies, I will not use you as my priest or my ministers. And so there hasn't been a single Jew willing to listen to God and speak for him in 2,500 years. And through the prophets, particularly through Yahshua, Yahweh has made it very clear that Yahweh has looked, and over this enormous chasm of time, there hasn't been a single Jew that has been willing to listen to God and convey his message to his people. So I was chosen by default, and it was predicted in probably 100 different ways throughout the prophets that God would finally have to turn to a Goyim, a Gentile, to witness to his people, to call them back home. And so the reason that you're hearing the voice of a guy who has dedicated the last 22 years of his life to translating Yahweh's testimony and conveying his message to his people is because there were none of his people that were willing to do it. So please, take this opportunity. Educate yourselves. Learn who God is. Accept his terms and conditions. Become part of his family. And then take up this family business. Become part of the family and engage in the family business as you become, grow really in this relationship and learn more and more about who Yahweh is and what he's offering. We would love for you to put us out to pasture and retire us. We will continue to study and to continue to talk, but we would love to be drowned out by the voice of thousands of returning Yahudim as they come to know Yahweh. And I will tell you, Yahweh would be thrilled as well. As it is, the very least that we can do is to awaken enough Yehudim, Jews and Israelites, such that the promises made through the prophet Yahshua and Yirmiah, speaking of the reunion that Yahweh anticipates with his people when he returns on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, October 2nd at sundown in 2033, is that we want that to be a wonderful reunion. We would love to have as many Yehudim look up to Yahweh, proclaim his name, and anticipate his arrival with his son, the Messiah, Dod, as is possible. And the more that are there, the more we will feel that we were successful doing what Yahweh has asked. So that is our mission. You are our audience. We encourage you to care enough for your soul to pick up the first book. It's one thing to listen to us. It's another thing to read. Yahweh is a big, big proponent of the written word. Please.
Yes.
Go to yadayah.com. Pull down the first book from that shelf. It is an introduction to God called the Word, and come to learn why you, why me. Well, Dee, thank you. I think our outreach was to Israel tonight. Yes. Kirk, I appreciate you surviving the atmospheric river, I guess is what they're calling it, right?
That's what they call it, yeah. That's
yeah,
what they call it.
Yeah. I would give you the instructions that Yahweh had for the ark, but you already know them.
Got to find a big hammer, though.
You may want to get some experience in glue lamps and see what your neighbors say.
Really glue is rolled out.
Yeah, what you try to build it in your front yard. I'm not sure you're going to find many animals willing to jump aboard, but
I got 2 dogs. That's about that is.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish you all the best and that you survive it. Take care, Dee. Enjoy northern Florida. I know it's a peaceable place for you, and we wish everyone listening a wonderful Shabat, and encourage our listeners, particularly Jews in America and Israelites, to give Yahweh a chance to walk away, disengage from your religion and politics, and for the first time in nearly 3,000 years, give Yahweh a chance. Listen to his voice. He's calling you home. Good night. Happy Shabbat to one and all.
Same to you.
Night, y'all.